thank you very much for being here. I know I spoke to many of you before we started, so I'm State Representative Rosemary M, and we are here to talk about the Lyme disease and tick-borne illness issue in Pennsylvania. And as I spoke to some of you, Pennsylvania is #1 in the country right now as far as our reported cases. And we have a lot of information that we'd like to try to help people understand, to protect their families, to protect themselves, and then just to be educated on the issue as we move forward. My efforts are very much focused with the two speakers today that you will meet, Jackie and Nicole, who will introduce themselves and their backgrounds, working with both of them very significantly, working with the Department of Health to really make sure Pennsylvania is doing everything and anything possible to protect our people that live in Pennsylvania and visitors. And so quickly, I'm just going to tell you that my efforts on the legislative end are, first of all, acknowledging that Pennsylvania is #1 in the country and urging the federal government to dedicate some of their funding to Pennsylvania based on our #1 status, which is critical. So it's appropriate dollars being dedicated to the state that has one of the highest concerns. That was one legislative initiative. We also acknowledged our lab downstairs with East Stroudsburg University and what they do as far as across the state of Pennsylvania and also other states on testing the ticks and offering information to the country, helping to train some of our Department of Health educators that travel the state. They're very, very active, so you'll learn more about them, and we're very blessed to have them right here in the community. The other piece of legislation that you will see from me is continuing medical education for our physicians. And this is requiring them to have an additional 2 hours of continuing medical education credits, specifically focused on Lyme disease and tick-borne illness. And that being the fact that because there's so many unknowns, that I think our doctors are really struggling as well. And so until we really have the true foundation of what's happening with our ticks and the pathogens that are inside them, the surveillance data and the knowledge, which we're trying to get from East Stroudsburg University and other sources, we really need to make sure our doctors can best diagnose as quickly as possible a patient. And we don't want to see a patient misdiagnosed or just missed completely and then years down the road have an issue. So really trying to help the doctors get what they need. We also have a piece of legislation with ticks on children in schools. So making sure that if a tick is found on a child in school, that its parent is notified immediately. Either the parent picks the child up or the school nurse would remove the tick with permission and keep it in a bag for 7 days, and then the information would encourage the testing of the tick and give the parents the resources so that this way we can help try to educate and make sure a child gets ahead of the game too and is not missed with Lyme disease or a tick-borne illness. So there is some good news coming out regarding East Stroudsburg University and some of the support that I have gotten for them in regards to being able to help subsidize some tick testing and help us get the information we need. So we'll announce that shortly, probably in the next month or two. So with that, I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank Nicole and Jackie for all the information they're going to present. This is a very intimate, quaint group. We'd like you to ask questions and feel really good when you walk out. That's something you could even spread to people as far as education. So thanks for being here, okay? And I guess we're gonna have first up Nicole, right? Okay.
Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? Thanks for coming. So I'm gonna start us off with our Dare to Be Tick Aware program. So I'll introduce myself first. I'm Nicole Chinisi. I'm actually the laboratory director of the Northeast Wildlife DNA Lab, which is just downstairs in this building. We're the largest tick testing facility and one of the largest in the United States and the only one in Pennsylvania. So people send us ticks from Pennsylvania or all over the country, and we test it for up to 17 different tick-borne diseases that we can test for. So down the line in the future, we'll have some funding coming through that will be good to subsidize that, but we do a lot of educational programs, and we assisted with the PA Lyme Resource Network in developing this Dare to Be Tick Aware presentation that you'll hear from me today, and then Jackie is going to be the second speaker. She's a lot of titles. So she's also a Dare to Be Tick Aware seminar facilitator. She's the VP and Director of Legislative Affairs and Policy for PA Lyme Resource Network, so she works very closely with a lot of representatives and senators across the state to push forth all this legislative bills that are going on in the House and the Senate. So she will be doing the second half of today's portion. So we'll be talking a lot about ticks, tick-borne diseases. So we do just want to let you guys know this a medical disclaimer that we're not diagnosing you. We're not giving you any medical advice. We're just letting you know what's out there, what's in the environment, and how you can protect yourself from these tick-borne diseases. So I'll go over a little bit of the trends in the legislation that's going on to piggyback what Representative Brown just had mentioned, and then I'll go into ticks and habitat, and then Jackie will take the rest of it on with the tick-borne diseases, and we'll go through DARE preventing tick bites, and then we'll wrap things up with how to prevent a tick bite. So Act 83, if you guys are not aware of it, it was passed in 2014. It was signed by the Secretary of Health, and it's 14 recommendations in prevention, education, awareness, and surveillance. And it gave detailed recommendations to what the state should be doing in each of those categories. We hadn't had much funding as it was passed in law in 2014, but this past fiscal year, the 18-19 budget, there was just $2.5 million that is allocated towards some of these recommendations. So how that's going to be split is unknown, but there is some funding coming down the line. But since the acts have been put into place in 2014, the Dare to Beat Tick Aware program was generated. So now we've gone out across the state and we've educated multiple different groups, high-risk groups. We've done Pennsylvania Department of PennDOT, Department of Transportation, and things like that. So we've done a lot of different high-risk groups as well as communities and things like that. So this funding was through the CDC Preventative Health Block Grant. We're still waiting to hear if we have funding again this year or if it's going to be coming out of the state funding. But if you know any other groups that are interested, you can email contact info@palyme.org, and we can get this program into that community as well. So this is a community-based program for education and prevention. So I'm just going to ask the one question. Does anybody in here have Lyme disease?
In the past, had it.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody know somebody with Lyme disease? Okay, so we have, so we have a couple who don't. Okay, good. So Lyme disease is the fastest growing infectious disease in the United States. It is the #1 vector-borne disease as well. You can see the trend of it is increasing from the early 90s up into the 2000s. There is a lapse in cases that the CDC puts up just because of the time it takes for them to confirm those cases. You can see here we have 30,000 cases of Lyme disease each year in comparison to other infectious diseases. There's a significant more amount of Lyme disease in the United States than anything else. The CDC actually recently in 2014 adjusted. They used to estimate 30,000 cases a year based off of confirmed cases. And they looked into doing a study. They contacted private laboratories and they asked them to submit to look at their data to see how many individuals actually tested positive for Lyme disease and the actual number of people that were reported. So there's a difference. You can test positive, but your physician actually doesn't report the case. So there was underreporting by 10 to 12 time factor. So they adjusted the 30,000 cases a year to 300,000 cases a year and potentially even more with undiagnosed cases. So the cases of Lyme disease in Pennsylvania was in 1996, and now this is in 2015. Their CDC is working on releasing their new maps, but essentially Lyme disease is spread across the entire state. We have cases in every county. And Pennsylvania, as Representative Brown said, is the #1 state for Lyme disease cases. We are 11,000 confirmed cases, but if you take into a factor that 10 factor underreporting, we actually have 114 actual cases of Lyme disease in the state of Pennsylvania. You compare that to our neighbor states of New York and New Jersey, you can add their states together, and they still wouldn't equal the number of cases that we have in Pennsylvania. So it is a health crisis here in the state, and we're moving forward to educate our residents to protect themselves. There are different areas, and this changes yearly based off of a lot of different environmental factors, but this was released as of 2016. Dark blue means higher number of cases of Lyme disease. White is the lower number of cases. So a lot of times we used to think the cases were really high down here, but this data now shows that we have a lot of cases out west and in the northeast section of Pennsylvania. And it does change yearly. It does change even when we test the ticks very rapidly, depending on seasonality and things like that in the environment. So the mice population is healthy, you'll see more increase in cases. And the age groups that are most at risk, children have the highest number of cases of Lyme disease, blue representing males, yellow representing females, and then our 40 to 55, 60 range. And so these are the highest number of cases that are confirmed in these age groups. Why do we say that? And why do we think that? I mean, children, think about what they do. They go outside, they're playing in leaves, they're rolling around in leaves, they're playing with their friends in the woods and having a great old time, but not checking for ticks. So they're doing hobbies that are putting them at greater risk for exposure to tick-borne diseases. And then we have our middle-aged range group here. Their children are getting older. They have some free time on their hands now. They're starting to get into things like gardening and getting outdoors and just putting themselves at risk. So that's a little bit of the trend and reason why these exposure rates are peaking in these age groups. But it's not just Lyme disease. So this chart represents all the different tick-borne diseases that we know of to date that are transferred by ticks, and the ones with the asterisks are diseases that we've diagnosed in Pennsylvania, so confirmed cases of them. So ticks, they carry a lot of different things, and they carry a lot of things other than Lyme disease, and they typically carry more than just one disease that we see now. So it's not just Lyme disease, and there's a bunch of different other things going on, and some of these things cannot be just treated with antibiotics. So you have your different types of Lyme disease or Lyme-like diseases here. Borrelia burgdorferi is the one you hear that causes Lyme disease, but you also have a relapsing fever-like bacteria. Babesiosis is a protozoal infection, very similar to a malaria-like reaction, can't be treated with antibiotics. We also are seeing Powassan virus in tick populations increasing, transmission in 15 minutes. Again, can't be treated with antibiotics. So there's a lot of things in the environment other than Lyme disease that we have to be aware of. But ticks in general, what are ticks? What do we need to know about ticks? If you know about the tick and you can know and understand what a tick is, it will really help your chances of identifying it early, knowing what you've been exposed to, and getting the proper treatment that you need. So what are ticks? Ticks are similar to spiders. They're part of the ractid family. They're ectoparasites, so they feed on the external portion of your body. They will not completely burrow in. They feed on birds, reptiles, mammals. They're found mainly in temperate areas, so these are areas with 4 seasons, but they have been increasing and spreading their range. So they're found now further south and further north in areas where there are not really temperate environments. It's a global issue. It's not just the United States. Europe is having a huge issue with tick-borne diseases and tick-borne encephalitis cases, which is similar to what our Powassan does. Our deer tick, which is also called the black-legged tick, is found in every state of the United States. A recent study was just released a couple months ago, identifying it in states and counties where we haven't seen it before, so it has officially been identified except for in Hawaii. In every state of the US. There are 4 life stages, which we'll talk about later more in depth: egg, larval, nymph, and adult. So they do vary what they look like at the different life stage, and your risk of exposure to these diseases at different life stages will vary. They're capable of transmitting many different types of diseases: bacterial, viral, protozoal, and these diseases are maintained in the wildlife populations. Mainly the mice populations are going to be the culprits of giving the diseases to the ticks as they feed. So I'm going to go through and give you pictures. I do have samples of these here today, so if you want to see the actual sizes of ticks, I do have them for you to view. So the first one's the black-legged tick. It's the smallest of all the ticks found in Pennsylvania. It is going to be the tick that transmits Lyme disease. I apologize, this is an outdated map, but the CDC is updating these and they will be released in January of 19. But the ones you want to notice here, this is the adult female. Black shield, red body. They have black legs, hence the name black-legged tick. You will also hear referred to as the deer tick, but scientifically we refer to them as the black-legged tick. We have the adult male, not associated with taking blood meals or transmitting diseases, they're just looking to mate. And then we have the nymph. So the nymph is the size of a poppy seed, the female is about the size of a sesame seed, and both the nymph and adult are capable of transmitting Lyme disease and other tick-borne diseases. And you can see the distribution of this, but again, it's been found in every state in the United States, and it's one of our most common ticks, especially in the fall and spring in Pennsylvania. Our next tick is the American dog tick. The American dog tick is also pretty widely distributed. You can see here it's anywhere from the eastern portion of Texas and Missouri east, and as well as parts of California. It's twice the size of the black-legged tick, not associated with Lyme disease, but does carry Rocky Mountain spotted fever, tularemia, ehrlichiosis, which can also have their bag of nasties as well. The adult female right here is represented by this white U-shaped shield that's on the dorsal side of her body, and then the male has this, I like to say they're like lightning bolts. So it has also the white U-shape, but then it has lightning bolts across the body. So that's how you can differentiate between male and female. And again, females are going to be the one associated with diseases with all of these ticks, as well as the nymphs. The nymph is right here. They're very hard to determine unless you can view them under a microscope, so you need some type of an expert to identify that for you. The next one is the Lone Star tick, and the Lone Star tick is becoming more and more common. Us as a laboratory, we do a lot of environmental studies where we go out and collect the ticks to see what's in the environment, and we are now finding it as far north as Pike County. There are reports of this now showing up in Maine and other states that are northern of this. So historically, it used to just be associated with the South. Southern tick-associated rash illness was what it transmitted, which is very similar to Lyme disease, but it's now making its way north, and we're finding it across the state of Pennsylvania. Nymphs are very similar to the black-legged tick in size, but they just have a yellow-red tinted leg as opposed to black legs. And the adult female has that white dot on its backside that you can use for identification purposes. Males are reddish-brown in color. The one thing about the Lone Star tick that's important in comparison to the other ticks that we find is the Cow Allergy. So upon a bite by a Lone Star tick, they inject their saliva. All ticks will inject their saliva into you. It's a numbing property that they do so that you can't tell that they're biting you. And in this saliva, they have this sugar called alpha-gal. Our bodies don't have the capabilities of breaking down this alpha-gal sugar. So it can happen after one bite, it can happen after multiple bites, but your body starts to build up an immune response to that sugar because it sees it as a foreign object where we're not capable of breaking it down. So essentially, the sugar is very similar to sugars that you would see in red meats or other mammalians' meat products. And as you eat the meat product, you trigger an allergic reaction because your body thinks it's being exposed to this alpha-gal sugar. Because they're so similar in shape and sizes, it's causing this reaction. So people in the South are seeing it more often, but these are cases that are moving forward. And every tick has this sugar in its saliva. It's just a matter of being exposed and how many times you're exposed that you get this allergy. And this allergy is also, if you've heard of the longhorn tick, we don't have it quite yet approved in our slides, but the longhorn tick has been identified in Pennsylvania. It was first identified in New Jersey, and we're seeing it spread and more rapidly. It can actually reproduce on its own. It doesn't need a male to mate with. And there's cases, it's an invasive species from Asia, and there are cases in Japan of red meat allergy associated with this tick as well. So it's just something I wanted to point out. Another tick that's the most widely distributed tick found in the United States is the brown dog tick. The brown dog tick is significant in association with dogs and kennels, and I'll talk about that in another second. But there's a couple of recent news articles been coming out about Rocky Mountain spotted fever association with brown dog ticks. So they are associated with Rocky Mountain spotted fever transmission, very common in this Mexico, Texas area that they're seeing this increase. But again, they're the most widely distributed tick. No coloration, just brownish red in color. There's no distinguishing features with them. So what's different between the brown dog tick and every other dog tick that we find is that, unlike other ticks, they don't like wooded and forest areas. They actually like to live in urban and suburban environments. So they thrive in living in homes. So they tend to only feed on one host, as in a dog, whereas other ticks will feed on whatever host that they come by. And kennels are really where dogs tend to pick them up. So you board your dog in a kennel or a cat, and they'll bring the ticks back home with them. You might not see it at first. The ticks will fall off into cracks of your home, into your floor, into your carpet, and they can reproduce very quickly and lay thousands of eggs and cause infestations in your home. So if you do have dogs and you board them in kennels, it's just important to know when they come home, make sure you check them thoroughly. So it's something you're not thinking about because they're not in wooded areas, so you're not thinking ticks, but it is something that can occur. Where are ticks found? So tick ecology, ticks habitat includes all of the list here: tall grass, thick brush, wooded areas. The forest edge is very high in the number of ticks that you see. Stone walls, underneath the leaf litter, down woods at the base of trees. So essentially all of this list of things are very good environments where mice like to live and where deer like to graze. Other wildlife like to create day beds. So essentially wherever you're gonna find your mice, your deer, and your wildlife populations, you're gonna find high tick populations. So the edges of forests are really important. That's where we find our highest density of ticks. And that's because that's where mice like to, that's where they can survive. Deeper in the woods, they're fed on by predators, and they can't survive as much as on the edges. So edges of forest, underneath the leaf litter, they like to stay moist and cool. High heat and dry temperatures will kill ticks, so they stay away from there. So if it's direct sunlight, no good for ticks. They like the moist, cool areas. So here are some examples of where they like to live. We are doing some studies right now with looking at infection rates near water. So the more water that's present, the ticks can extract that moisture from the air to keep them alive in very hot weather. So looking at infection rates where there's water present, whereas areas that are more dry, to see if there's association with that. Leaf litter here, down the bases of trees, and the rocks are great for mice to burrow under and create their habitats. Down wood, again, that creates nice moisture. When it rains, it holds the moisture in for ticks to survive under. Bases of trees, that's where your deer like to create their day beds. Bears will lay up against the bases of trees and will drop the ticks off there, and stone walls. Tick behaviors, ticks can't jump and they cannot fly. I always like to say this first. They don't have wings, so they can't fly, and their legs are very simple, so they don't have mechanisms to propel themselves for jumping. So what they do is what's called questing for the black-legged tick and the American dog tick. So they're very simple anatomy. There's really nothing to ticks, which makes this phenomenon even more impressive. They have a stomach that they put blood in, and they have salivary glands, and they have one organ called the Haller's organ, which brings in senses. They have no eyes, they can't see you, so they stick out their front forelegs. They have their olfactory Haller's organ right under there that senses your CO2, your heat, and your pheromones. So the closer you get, the more you'll see their legs wiggle around, and they're waiting for you to pass by to grab on. So they'll sit at the bases of leaf litter, brush, shrubs, and they just stick out their legs and wait. And they wait. And once you come by, they grab on, and then they find a place to eat. They can survive hundreds of days without blood meals, so they'll do this every day until they get a blood meal. The Lone Star tick's a little bit different. It's more aggressive. It will actually hunt down its source. So once it senses that CO2 and pheromones, it will crawl closer and closer and closer until it gets to that source. But the black-legged ticks and American dog ticks, and even the longhorn tick, we're seeing it, will be attached and just questing, waiting for that host to come by. So these are just areas of where the ticks like to quest. So tall grass, edges of forests, brush, and things like that. Again, they won't go very high. They'll come about to your knee level, a couple feet off the ground for the adults, a couple inches off the ground for the nymphs, and they just stick out their forelegs and wait for that host to brush by. The life cycle is important because this is going to indicate peak risk periods. So understanding when and what ticks are active at what time of the year is important. So I'm just going to point out that the fall, which we're coming into, so right now we're in a bit of a lull. The activity of ticks is down only because they're in dormant phases. So we're in our summer, we're in our summer months right here, so we're going into the fall months. So larval ticks are active, which typically don't feed on us as humans. They're too small. They feed on the smaller mammals, the mice, and the birds. So they're active right now, and then once we hit the fall season, we have our adults. All the adults will be active, and that's about mid-October that they'll start to come out. The adults will stay active until snowfall in hopes to get a blood meal. If they don't, then they'll try to survive the winter months, and then they'll come out in early spring or any time of the year when the temperature is above freezing. The springtime is when our nymphs are active. The nymphs are considered the most dangerous because they're so tiny in size. They actually have a lower prevalence of infection rates. They don't have as many diseases that they carry, but because they're so small, most people don't find them on them until they've been attached for a few days, putting them at risk of anything that they're carrying. The adults, sometimes we can see them crawling on us and we pull them off before they actually attach. So springtime, we have our nymphs and adults active, and then the fall time, we just have our adults. And adults do have the highest prevalence of diseases that they carry, so it's important to look for those because more than 50% of them can be carrying a disease. So here it just shows the dangerous months. So essentially when the nymphs are active, you have a spike in number of cases. Because of their size, it becomes challenging to see them. So this is what a nymph would look like on a blade of grass, and then this is a nymph in comparison to an adult on a finger, and this is actual size. And I do have ticks here today, so after the presentation we can look at the specimens. Tick size does vary, so we did discuss how small the black-legged tick is in comparison to the dog tick. It is our smallest tick that we find in Pennsylvania. Here you can see on the finger, this is the adult female, adult male, nymph, and larvae. So this is the actual size of them. And as the ticks feed, they can feed for 5 to 10 days. They do increase in size. So that's typically how people determine that they have a tick attached to them, with it being engorged. They'll see something that looks like a skin tag or something hanging off, and then they pull it off and realize that it's a tick. So it's challenging at their naive stage here when they're unfed to see them, but as they engorge with blood, they do increase in size. So it's really important to know this because a lot of people think big ticks, dog ticks, but that's not always the case. Big ticks could just mean engorged tick. So I did discuss that the mice are the #1 culprit for transmitting the disease. So the myth is that deer are associated with Lyme disease, deer are the ones for the spread of Lyme disease, but that's actually not true. Deer have no capabilities of giving ticks Lyme disease. They're not associated with it at all. The only thing that deer play a role in this life cycle is increasing the number of ticks that we see. And why? Because you can see here on the ear of this deer, they have a couple of ticks, probably a couple hundred ticks here. We've have studies that are published with identifying up to 400 ticks on an animal at one time, so on a deer or a bear. And one adult female mating falls off and can lay up to 4,000 eggs. So you can see how wildlife can play a huge role in increasing the number of ticks that we see, but it's the mice that are associated with transmission of diseases. So they have the best ability when they're carrying a disease to then give that disease to a tick. There's very few animals that can do that. If the white-footed mice has it best, it's called confidence, to give those diseases to the tick. Shrews and chipmunks can do it at some capacity as well, but not as well as the white-footed mouse. So why do we see the increase? We get this question all the time. I don't remember ticks when I was younger. There was no issues with Lyme disease when I was younger, these tick-borne diseases, what's going on in the environment. Well, it's very complex. There's a lot of environmental factors that play a role in the increase that we're seeing, and here's a few of them up here. So I talked about the deer, so increase in wildlife populations. You can see 1990 we only had 500,000. Now in the 2000s we have I think we're over 200 million at this point in populations. So more deer give us more ticks. More ticks give us more diseases. Mice are the culprits of giving us the Lyme disease. So when we have forest fragmentation, we increase our surface area of our forest edges. So more forest edges give us more mice. More mice give healthier populations, and they are the ones that spread the diseases. So with the more mice, we get more of the spirochetes that cause Lyme disease. The spirochete that causes Lyme disease evolves very quickly. It's a very smart bacteria. A lot of the physicians that do work with this and the researchers that work with this evolves so quickly. It's so complex. Once it enters our systems, it just changes entirely. It becomes very hard to detect it. We have over 100 different strains of it now, which each strain is associated with different symptoms. So it's very complex. And then we have shifts in temperatures. So we have shorter winters, allowing ticks to survive longer and actually lay their eggs, which also increases. And I just want to touch again on the forest fragmentation, just to give you kind of an idea. So forest fragmentation, you can think back when we had all of our landscape and our geographical populations in Pennsylvania. We had a lot of farmland, and then we went through this restoring our forest populations and growing forests, and then within those we create our homes and we create these pockets in the forest, and then we get more mice. So actually in residential areas that border forest have your highest populations of mice and tick-borne diseases. So you think going to a state park, you might be exposed to greater diseases, but it's actually in your backyard. So you really want to protect yourself there. So mice populations are low in very forested area because you have a lot of predators. You have foxes, you have coyotes, you have hawks, you have things that are going to feed on the mice. So your diseases decrease. You have a lot of ticks, but the diseases in those ticks decrease. It's in these forest fragmented areas that your increase in infected ticks goes up. So at that time, I'm going to turn it over to Jackie.
There is some coffee and donuts over there if you'd like. It's on the table over there.
Good morning. Thank you guys for coming out. I am an attorney, and so you think to yourself, why is an attorney up here talking about ticks? But I have an interesting background where I started out in education. I'm a certified Pennsylvania teacher. I focused on middle school science. Then for a while, when I was getting my master's in communication, I began working in healthcare on the administrative professional end. I have a family that is involved in the sciences, doctors and lawyers. So I became very active in this endeavor when I discovered that the illness that I had been trying to figure out for over a decade turned out to be Lyme disease, and made more even complex because I had co-infections along with it. About 3 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to speak to you because I could barely talk, and there were a couple nights that we weren't sure I was going to survive. So I can tell you that once it's figured out, and education and awareness is the key, that there is the ability to maintain an active, productive life. So tick-borne diseases are something that I feel very strongly and have for the past year now. I've been working with Pennsylvania Lyme Resource Network. I'm working as their VP and Director of Legislative Affairs and Policy. And that's where I got the chance to speak with Rosemary Brown and see all the wonderful things she's doing legislatively to get this on everyone's radar so that people don't go through what I had to go through. So we're going to talk about tick-borne diseases. The most well-known disease is, in fact, one of the things that I have is the Borrelia burgdorferi. It was discovered in Lyme, Connecticut, hence the name, in the 1970s amongst a group of children who lived in a similar neighborhood setting, and a mom there noticed some symptoms that the range of children that hung together were all having. It is now found everywhere throughout the northeastern U.S., and as you heard, it's progressing throughout the entire United States, minus Hawaii at the moment. Lyme disease in particular is given to folks through the deer tick, and the primary host that introduces the bacteria into the deer tick is the white-footed mouse. There are less recognized co-infections, which I'm hoping to change that, because the co-infections play a significant role in how effective treatment can be for the Lyme disease bacteria. Co-infections can happen frequently in ticks, and all the folks that I have met in my endeavor here in the past 2 years of educating that do have Lyme disease, I have yet to meet someone who only had Lyme disease, who didn't have at least one other infection or multiple infections. I myself have 3. So there is, from the deer tick, a host of diseases: Lyme, relapsing fever, anaplasmosis, Bartonella. Bartonella is something that you can also get from other vectors too, including fleas. The American dog tick has a host of diseases that they also carry. As you can see, the Lone Star tick has the one people are really talking about right now, the associated rash stari. And then there's other viral illnesses too that are just in these ticks, as Nicole was sharing with you. There's just 14, 15 bacteria that we know of that come up in people here that affect us, but they carry a host of other illnesses too, bacteria. Disease transmission. Well, the scientific studies have shown, and they're still ongoing, this is an emerging science, and there's new information coming out daily as researchers all over the world are exploring this more, And so the time period for transmission is 18 to 24 hours, but you know, what we hear of it even getting walked back to potentially sooner. Rossetti is about 6 hours, and then really scary, the Powassan virus is only 15 minutes. Time is of the essence. So Lyme disease transmission, when a tick bites you, if you can get it off soon, you can see that the risk is under 10% that something that would cause an ill effect in a person would be transmitted. But being so small, as Nicole was sharing with you, sometimes people don't notice them, especially when they're in that nymph stage. And so it's very easy to have one on you for 24 hours before you would notice. And as it goes into 48 hours and 72, it's well over 90% likely that if they have a disease that can be transmitted to a person, that you could then have it and you're exposed to it. So you want to remove the ticks, and you want to be checking yourself for ticks when you come inside, because you do not want it to be on you. The longer length of time, the more likely that the diseases they're carrying are actually going to be transmitted to you. So when you look at some studies of Pennsylvania from 2015, and we also talked about how there's more information coming in, it just hasn't been able to be distributed yet. There are illnesses throughout the state of Pennsylvania that the ticks carry that have been documented in all the counties. And when they're looking to the different ticks, you can see that there are 3 that are extremely common throughout the state. The Borrelia, which is the Lyme disease, the Anaplasma, which is another illness within, and Babesia. So I have 2. I have the Borrelia, which is at the top, and the Babesia. I also have Bartonella. So preventing tick bites, because that's really the key to this whole reason for doing education, is so that people don't wind up in this situation. And had I had the knowledge 10 years ago that I do now, I think it could have been a huge game changer for me. So our program has the DARE, to be tick aware motto. DARE, defend yourself and property. And we're going to go into A, avoid tick habitat. R, remember tick checks and then take a shower. And E, the final step is eliminating ticks correctly when you remove them from you, because when you're removing the tick, there are things you can do to lessen your increase in the transmission of the bacteria if you do it in a certain way. So defending, first you need to protect yourself and of course your children. One of the key things you can do if you know you're going to be outside for the day is particularly dress for the situation. I, for 5 years, did a program through the educational department of Camp Hill in Pennsylvania. The children in 6th grade go to a camping trip called Camp Canadensis for 3 nights. And the folks would always comment that I wore white jeans for the 3 days out in the woods. And I wore them specifically so that then if a tick were on me, it would be easier to see. So wear light colored clothing. You want to wear long pants, a shirt, and a hat. And then wear tight weave socks. The one thing I didn't do to embarrass my children was pull the socks over my jeans, but I did wear boots that went up to my knee. So that does make a difference. The reason for the socks going over your jeans are because if the ticks attach on your shoe level and they start to climb up, if it can make it underneath and into your jean, it gives them significantly more of an advantage if they have to climb up your shoes over your socks and not have that gap, then that's less chance that they're going to hit your skin. So if you do have bare skin exposed, you're going to want to consider using DEET. That's something you can buy at your local outdoor store, sporting goods store. It would be recommended that 20% or more strength for adults, 10% for kids. The higher the concentration, is the longer amount of time for the protection. You can use products that have picardin. There are less toxic options made from a host of plants. I plant lemon eucalyptus in pots all around my patio. And it smells great, but it's also something you can use on your skin. Personally, one of the things that I use, and when I would do the camping trip, I would always spray my clothes, my shoes, and my socks with Permethrin. I would spray them in advance of going outside and let them dry overnight. It is a spray that you do not put on your skin. It is for things that you would wear. And then you want to have a monthly routine. Because where we live in Camp Hill, we have a lot of water, we have a lot of little streams, we have a creek nearby, we have a lot of outdoor space that children can use in the form of parks, and our neighborhoods but right up against all these different locations. And so for my family, we have all the shoes lined up in our garage, and once a month I grab my can of Permethrin and I spray all the shoes down in the evening so that then the next day when they're running out, if they've forgotten to put on socks or shoes, or socks or jeans that are sprayed, at least I know that their shoes are sprayed, and that is in some studies showing up to 70 to 75% of a reduction in the tick then choosing to bite you. One of the interesting things about Permethrin is that it will actually, in recent studies I've seen, it will disengage the tick's ability to bite after a certain time period, and it is one of the few things that then actually does kill the tick. So it's good to use. Defend, use Permethrin pre-treated clothing to reduce tick bites. I was just talking to the manager of the store in Camp Hill, Field and Stream, and he let me know that they are actually in the fall going to be carrying the clothing line right in the store. As of right now, you can order through Orvis and other brands clothing online that have been pre-treated, and when it's pre-treated like that, it can last up to 70 washes. They claim it's the lifetime of the clothes, thinking that maybe you're going to wear it like maybe once a week or so, and wash them. When you spray with the can like I do at home, it says 6 washings to 10 washings, but for the shoes, like I said, I just spray once a month. So look for the different displays that have these types of clothing already treated. So Defend, you want to spray for personal protection, and it really doesn't take very long at all. In 1 minute to 2 to do all the different things that I'm going to suggest. You want to spray your skin, and then you want to make sure that your clothes were sprayed prior. My son loves, he's a high school student, and he mows lawns and takes care of quite a few of our neighbors that way. And the jeans that he wears regularly to mow lawns in, he is sprayed, and he sprays those monthly. And his socks, so it's not that he doesn't go outdoors, it's not that he doesn't go into the grass, it's not that he doesn't do outdoor activities and work outdoors, it's that he sprays his clothing. And to get a 17-year-old to do that lets you know just how simple and fast it is to actually get this to happen. It's jamming. Spray options. So chemical. The CDC recommends repellents that contain 20% or more of DEET on your exposed skin for protection that lasts several hours. There are the natural options. Those are not subject to EPA testing if that's something that you're interested in. So consider that, research it. Studies have been done on natural essential oils and for spraying yards and people, and there's evidence that they do work. I do enjoy all the different types of products like that, and I plant oregano around my house, I plant lavender, lemon eucalyptus, all those different things, and those are what then are used to make essential oils, and so there's a variety. The percentage of essential oils in them must be known, so you want to buy them from a reputable source, maybe a health food store. In Camp Hill we have called the Healthy Grocer, and they carry a lot of essential oils because 30% of it is necessary. So defending your home. You want to create an environment that's inhospitable for tick survival, and it's a challenge because even as I was pulling up the trash cans this week, I saw some little mice scurrying around our house. So you have to be on top of it. They need moisture to live, and so one of the things you can do is you can increase sunlight in your yard and activity areas. You can use bark chips and have those instead of mass plant ground covers. And you want to have your play equipment that's moved into the sun, rather you think the shade would be nice for the children, but it does cause them to be in a higher risk being closer to where the ticks would be living. I know that we really keep our lawn really short. My kids like to say that Mom likes to have a golf course for our yard. I never let it grow too high. we have mulch around it, and it is definitely really dry. And as I said, I still saw mice when I was pulling the trash cans up this week. So you do have to really work at it. Okay, so you want to create a safe zone, which is exactly what we did. High-risk areas are your lawns that are adjacent to woods. Well, where we live, there's woods everywhere. We see all kinds of wildlife. So one of the first things we did was we made sure we have a mulch perimeter, because most ticks are within 9 feet from the wood's edge, and our neighborhood, literally each home, has plantings going around the perimeter of their yards. So our entire perimeter of our backyard has this mulch. Our lawn then in the middle stays really, really short. And there are some wood chips, the Atlantic yellow cedar, that work really well. And then I plant evergreens that are our types of plantings for around the edges of our yards. I don't have any ground cover in my yard. That's one of the first things we actually removed. You do want to schedule potentially tick-killing spray treatments in high-risk areas. We border up next to a very vast bamboo edge on one side of our property, and it stays very moist there. So, you know, we do have a lawn service care that comes out and sprays for us to help us, and that's also great for mosquitoes as well. So to defend, time-targeted spraying, chemical tick control agents that carry permethrin. You can look on the back of any of the containers, like when I go into Home Depot or Lowe's, I always look on the back to see if I can see any of those terms on there, because then that lets you know that it will also work for ticks. Not every spray does, so you do want to double check that. The permethrin is a fun product in and of itself, because you can actually plant the flower that permethrin comes from. I have some in my yard. It's from the chrysanthemum family, and they're called painted daisies. And rabbits do like them, even though ticks do not. I know the rabbits really got a hold of mine this year. You can also have natural organic sprays on your yard, and that's for if you just don't want to use chemicals or pesticides. Cedar oils are very effective. Garlic as well. You want to consider treating your lawn 3 times per year, mid-May, mid-June, and October. One of the things that you can do is get tick tubes. I was just in Hazleton's Home Depot, and I saw the tick tubes actually for sale there. But if you're in an area where the Home Depot stores or Lowe's don't carry, or Ace Hardware stores don't carry the tick tubes, it's a great thing that you can do. And I know I'm going to be working with Boy Scout Troop, and one of the things we were talking about was making our own, where you simply save your toilet paper rolls or your paper towel rolls, and you don't even have to go and buy cotton balls. You can use dryer lint, and then you use the permethrin spray. I personally use a Sawyer brand permethrin spray, and you spray the cotton or the lint with the permethrin. You put it inside the tube, and then you lay it in areas where you see the mice. So like where our trash cans were when I put them away yesterday and I saw a little mouse scurry, I'm gonna put some of those out and about, and what happens is the mice or the mole or the vole will take some of that for their bedding and take it into their nest. It's treated, and so that way, even though it's the mice that have the bacteria initially, any ticks that would be feeding on them, they will die. So then you won't have the chance of a tick that is carrying that illness bite you. So the mice survive it, but the ticks die from it. So a note on pet protection, because I have 2 dogs, one of whom has Lyme disease and one who does not. Our one dog that does have it, he was prior to our Lyme knowledge, and he is aging quite well, but he did get treated with our veterinarian. And one of the things that you should do is make sure that you protect your pet, because they're down low to the ground and they go out in the grass. And since our diagnosis in my family, we got a puppy, and she's now going on 3. We put a collar on her by Seresto, And when she gets tested regularly, when she goes to her veterinary checks, she is still negative for Lyme, even though she's going in all the same locations that our beagle has been. So that it does work. So you want to talk to your vet. There are topical products, which would be recommended if you have young children in the house, because that is something you put right onto the dog and it sinks into their fur. The collars are what we use. We have older children, so I don't worry that my teenager is going to suck on the collar or something or touch it too much and then touch themselves in the face or whatever. And so we have found the collars to be really, really effective for our dog. And there's also a vaccine that our veterinarian gives out. And when the dogs do go out, you do want to check them, their ears, their eyes, their legs, their belly. You root for their mouth. I saw a horrible picture of one embedded in an eye. So you do want to really look over your pets. And one of the things that we do regularly, because we do live in an area, and we also have a cabin where we take our pets with us, their blankets in their crates, we treat regularly with the Permethrin. So if they do decide to go bounding through an area that is, high probability of ticks, when they first come into the house, we say, go to your crate, and they'll stay in there for half an hour to an hour, just to hopefully take care of any that they might have brought in with them. I would also recommend, if you travel with your pet, that you could spray the back seat of your car, and that way it would be something that would take care of the ticks while they're sitting there. Cats, there's no scientific evidence of cats getting Lyme disease. Be aware, though, that just because the cat might not have Lyme disease doesn't mean that they couldn't bring a tick in if they're an indoor-outdoor cat with them. So they can drop them off and then you can get bit. They say do not allow pets to get on your bed. I will tell you that we have a really hard time with that, and that's why we pre-treat their blanket area for the pet, and for even on my children's bed, they have an additional throw that our dogs like to lay on, and so I treat that. The kids don't snuggle with that particular blanket. So. However, I also sprayed my sleeping bag when I've gone camping. I spray the interior, and as long as the Permethrin is dry, I personally have not had a reaction to it. Occasionally people can have, depending on your immune system and your susceptibility to things, test it out. But, once the Permethrin is dry, it's fairly safe. However, Permethrin can be fatal to cats if not dried. So if you live in a neighborhood and you're having someone come spray your lawn, that it's really essential that they put those little signs out that your lawn is just sprayed so that your neighbors can know. Maybe don't let their outdoor cat that goes indoor-outdoor cross into your yard while it is just wet, because Permethrin can in fact be fatal to cats if it's not dried. So avoiding tick habitat. So high grass areas, contact with litter, low-lying ground covers. You want to be careful when you're kneeling, sitting, crawling, and gardening. Walking on deer trails or edges of the woods. Ticks are clumped and not evenly distributed, so you can actually stumble upon an area that has, quite a few of them in clusters. Sitting on logs and stone walls, I don't do anymore because that's where the mice like to build their habitat, so I just don't risk it. Bird feeders also, think of that, ticks and mice habitat, that area. One of the best things you can do if you've gone out hiking, or what my son does whenever he's gone out mowing lawns, is when he gets into his vehicle, if he had outer clothing on, like when he's doing leaf work, he will put the outer clothing in a black trash bag and put it in the trunk of his car. And then when he comes home in the garage, he will remove his clothing and carry them into the house and immediately put them into the dryer. Not the wash machine, it's the dryer that you want to put them in. The high heat will kill the ticks. You want to do it for 20 minutes to a half an hour. And then you can wash your clothes, but do the dryer first. So, and then you want to remember to do a tick check and a shower. So as soon as you come in, you want to look all over, check your kids, check your pets. You want to have another person do it. My kiddos will always say, I've already looked, and I always tell them, you have to have one of us also look. You can't just do it yourself. And then the other thing you can do is take a shower immediately, under 2 hours after being exposed, because ticks that are unattached will fall off in the shower. Now, ticks that are attached will not. Okay, so the shower only works for those that were still not attached to you. So there are certain locales that you want to look on for your body for this, and it's mostly crevices. They like places that they're going to be able to be undisturbed. So, and especially in your hairline, behind your ears. I had a girlfriend whose little boy had a couple of ticks in his belly button, and he had one embedded, believe it or not, between his fingers, because they can be that small that you just don't notice. So anywhere there's crevices on your body is where you would want to really look. And then you want to eliminate the tick correctly if you have one that is actually attached. So there is a proper way. A lot of old school ways of removing ticks are really not the way to do it. I know, just talking with my grandfather and my father-in-law in particular, that some of the methods that they said that they would use to remove ticks when they were younger would definitely not be a way you would want to do it. You hear of people sometimes taking a lighter to a tick to cause them to disengage. You don't want to do anything like that. What you do want to do is grasp a tick firmly nearest to the head, as close to the skin as possible. You do not want to squeeze the tick. When you squeeze the tick, or if you burn the tick, if you twist the tick, or do anything to get the tick upset, it's kind of like, you know, putting a kid on a Ferris ride, and it shakes them up after they've eaten, and they're going to regurgitate. The tick will, in that process of you manipulating them incorrectly, throw up the contents, and you have more now entering into your body. So you want to just not squeeze anywhere except as close to the head as you can and close to the skin. You want to then pull it straight out. You want to then clean the area with alcohol wipes or hot soapy water, and watch for any indication of infection. So you do not twist the tick, you do not burn the tick, do not squeeze the body, and also I forgot the petroleum jelly. You don't want to smother the tick. Those things are just not going to be beneficial to you. So there are a lot of studied tick removal tools that you can find besides just a handy pair of tweezers. There's the Pro Tick Remedy, there's tick check cards, and those things just really work really well. What to do with the tick? So you don't want to flush the tick down the toilet. You don't want to burn the tick. If you're going to actually throw it out and not save it to have the tick checked, then you want to put it into something that is sealed. You wouldn't want to throw it in your trash can and then have it crawl out and get somebody else. So you want to put it in a plastic sealable bag with a moist cotton ball and put it in your freezer. So if you then have symptoms, where do you send a tick for testing? Well, you can do that here at tickcheck.com, East Stroudsburg University. And when they do their testing, you just don't see statistics like this. It's 99.9% accurate. So if it comes back that there's nothing going on with that tick, you can really, really breathe a sigh of relief. So as you can see, there's IGeneX, there's Tick Report. There are labs that are doing for research only, not for diagnosis, Bay Area and Drexel. So acting if bitten by a tick and catching tick-borne disease early is essential. So what are some early signs and symptoms? And it's amazing, I had so many of these signs and symptoms and actually went to a variety of medical doctors, but we never put all the pieces together to come up with the answer. You can have a headache. I began experiencing migraines. You can have hearing loss and paralysis of the face. I actually had Bell's palsy. It presented bilaterally, which means I had it on both sides of my face. And they were looking to see if maybe I had stroke at the time. You have muscle soreness, but a lot of people are very active. I used to run. And so you assume that you're going to have some soreness from running. You think maybe I just ran funny, pulled something. The erythema migraines is the bullseye rash, and or a variety of rashes. I never had a bullseye rash, but when I would run, I started having strange other types of rashes show up that I had never had before. And so sometimes a rash that you have not had before, or multiple rashes, can be an indicator. It's not always going to be that pretty bullseye. You can have heart complications. I too had heart complications where I had a rhythmic pattern that was too fast at times. And you can have nausea and vomiting. One of the key things that you can have within a 7 to 10 day period from the bite is to have something where you think in the fall time that you're having the flu, where you're having fever, chills, fatigue, weakness, but maybe you're not throwing up. So that's a time to pause and say, maybe these things in combination are the early signal to Lyme disease. One of the interesting things about Lyme disease is that you're not necessarily going to have that constant ache in the same place. It can come and then it can go. It can actually move around the body. You can have like a really sore elbow 1 week, and then 2 weeks later, for some reason, you're having foot pain, and then that goes away, and then you have some knee pain. So there's a variety of things to be focused on. So the progression. So early localized when it's acute, that would be early onset. That's the best time to catch it, is when you have that flu-like symptom, but it's fall or spring. But the key thing is maybe you're not throwing up, you're not having any gastrointestinal things, and or if you see the bullseye rash. Early disseminated, and that means that it's begun to spread throughout an organ or your body. And that's when you begin to have joint pain. You can have sleep disturbances where it's harder for you to fall asleep. Maybe you wake up and multiple times a night. You can begin to have headaches. You can have fatigue. Some people have just crushing fatigue. Some people just feel like, well, now they must be working harder. They need an afternoon coffee, when in the past they hadn't ever needed that. Bell's palsy, that's where you have a paralysis of your face muscles, usually on one side, but if it occurs in some people bilaterally, that's a huge indicator that you should look for Lyme. Late disseminated, sometimes called persistent, or even insufficiently treated, could be arthritis, which is joint pain. That can happen in your hands, your feet, anywhere. Fatigue, cognitive problems. Some people liken it to brain fog, where you just can't quite come up with that name of the person you were thinking of. And then, of course, there's cardiac complications, which means your heart has become involved. So the bullseye rash, that's a diagnostic for Lyme. If you present with a bullseye rash, you do have Lyme disease. A bullseye rash only appears if you have Lyme disease. So, doctors don't always then do blood work for it, because the bullseye rash is a giveaway. So you can see to the left, there's the classic bullseye rash. It can be large, it can be small, it can be raised, it can be very red, it can feel hot. So less than 50% of the people get a rash. And there's all kinds of discussion as new and emerging information is coming out. Is it something you get maybe the second bite? You can have several concentric circles which expand over time. It can be raised or flat, warm, painful, painless, or itchy. And it does vary considerably in appearance and size. And here's some other examples of some of the different rashes, because it's not always circular. I know a lot of times people can confuse it on the scalp with maybe ringworm in a child. So co-infections, prevalence and impact. 53% of patients with persistent symptoms reported co-infections, which are then confirmed through laboratory testing. 30% reported 2 or more co-infections. 32% were Babesia, 28% were Bartonella, and 15% were Ehrlichia. Being infected with Lyme with co-infections leads to more severe outcomes. The patients get sicker, they stay sicker longer, diagnosis and treatment is more difficult and more complicated. Why? Because it's complex. You're not just fighting one bacteria, then you have a variety of bacteria that you have to take care of, and each individual bacteria can weaken the immune system in different ways. So, co-infection hallmark symptoms. So for Lyme disease, which is the very top, it's fever, headache, fatigue, joint and muscle pain, loss of appetite, sometimes disorientation and memory loss, lack of coordination, and then you can have even more severe neurological conditions. For Bartonella, it causes distinctive stretch mark-like rashes. So sometimes it kind of looks on your waist area. You see this on children where they shouldn't have stretch marks as they're growing like that. And it can have swollen glands. They can have their lymph nodes flaring, fatigue, headache, arthritis, general aches and pains, shin pain, seizures, neurological disorders, dementia, vision loss, and even eye infections. Then there's babesiosis, which can cause high fevers, air hunger, anemia, sweats, chills, severe headache, fatigue, and sleep disturbances. Like in the air hunger, people kind of seem to understand that better when they think of it like asthma. Well, a lot of times it gets misdiagnosed as that. In fact, that's what it was diagnosed with me. Then there's ehrlichiosis, which is high fevers, chills, headaches, fatigue, general achiness. I think you're beginning to see that a lot of these things overlap. And so when you go in, if you think that you've been bitten by a tick or if you have a bullseye, it really behooves you to make sure that you look for more than just Lyme disease. So here's some pictures of the distinctive Bartonella rash. The rashes are distinctive, and it's interesting, they call it sometimes cat scratch fever because it kind of looks like a cat scratch. And ticks aren't the only insect that carries Bartonella. Fleas do as well. So why is all this important? Because when Lyme is considered, co-infection should be considered as well. For the different infections, there are different tests. And for the different infections, then there's different treatment. Treating only Lyme may not treat the other infections, resulting in symptoms that, let me say persistent, but I would just say insufficiently treated or not treated at all. So what do you want to do? You want to see your doctor if you have new onset symptoms after a tick bite or possible exposure. Remember the 50% rule. 50% of people do not recall a tick bite, and 50% do not recall a rash. So you can prevent Lyme and tick-borne diseases, and the vast majority of the bites occur in your very own yard, so you want to protect your property and yourself. Just like when you lock your front door, you want to take care of your yard from the ticks. Tick-borne diseases can have serious health consequences, including cognitive and psychiatric, so catching the disease early is the best opportunity to prevent illness and complications. Children are at high risk for all the reasons Nicole said, because they just are lovers of the outdoors and they're down low right where those ticks are. And then always, keep checking, because science that is emerging means that there's not a set, established, confirmed way to handle it, and they're still exploring and learning. So I think my 3 things that I would say as a takeaway is make sure that you remember that when you are considering Lyme disease, that you consider co-infections, that you look into a Permethrin spray that you can pre-treat, if nothing else, at least your shoes and your socks. And that you then also think of ways that you can make your yard more safe and less conducive to ticks living there. At the end, we always do like a little question and answer. So if you all have any questions, hopefully we have some answers for you. And I appreciate all your attention.
I got a million questions.
All right, well, hit me.
Is there a special blood test to get done when you suspect? Or will a regular blood test show anything?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because there are general blood tests that they can take that doctors can look at and see issues going on with your immune system, but then there are specific blood tests that look strictly for Lyme disease or babesiosis or Bartonella.
So you have to ask for it.
You could mention to your physician, I think I have been bitten by a tick, and yes, I would suggest if they aren't aware of the different tests, that you could mention and say, I think I'd really like to, I was just at a talk and I think I'd like to be tested for, I've been having high fevers, babesia as well.
Will birds eat ticks?
There are a variety of animals that do in fact eat ticks, and my father-in-law has a little gentleman's farm, and so one of the things that he has are guinea hens and chickens, and they do, yes.
Excuse me, if I
Yes.
may interject.
Sure.
Opossums, they eat thousands of ticks, and they're probably
They
the
do.
greatest predator of ticks. I've learned that this past summer.
You are right.
Over here at the Cherry Valley Wildlife Refuge Facility. They're probably the greatest predator of ticks that I'm aware of and that exists right now.
I agree with you. I've seen all those new information that's been coming out, and so all of our kids, we were so excited when we saw baby opossums this year in the bamboo area beside our house. So yes, we were like, be nice to the opossums.
Absolutely.
And to add on that, a lot of animals that are very good at grooming themselves, so opossums are groomers, they groom themselves very often, so that's why they eat so many ticks. It's the same thing with guinea hens, they're groomers and they graze, but cats as well. That's why there's no confirmed cases in cats, because they're very good at grooming themselves. Cats are capable of getting Lyme disease. It's been shown in laboratories, it's been shown in research, but there's no confirmed cases because they're really good at grooming themselves. So animals like that are really good because they groom the ticks off of them.
I'm confused about this heat. Now, Rosemary said she had a package in her car, and you're gonna have it up to 110 degrees. It should kill anything, but these apparently were still alive. And now you're saying, in one instance for 60 minutes, and I thought you said 30 minutes with high heat. What?
So heat versus moisture heat. So if you have dry heat, will kill the ticks. Moisture heat will not. And I believe Representative Brown, they were in a Ziploc bag, so they kept it will hold moisture in, allowing them to survive that high heat. So they can survive high heat in the presence of moisture.
I have a question. You talked about using permethrin.
Yes.
I use it too,
Okay.
and it really does work great. The question I have, are there any consequences, health consequences of using it, even though it dries on your clothes and then you wear it? Are there any studies that you're aware of that show that if there's any health consequences from using permethrin sprayed clothes?
Do you want to jump in or you want me? Okay, so well, actually, it's interesting to know permethrin is used in a variety of situations, and when it is dry, the biggest thing that people note is some people might have a skin reaction, and that would just be individual, but it doesn't seem like it's that prevalent. Most people, especially when you're spraying the exterior of your clothing, there's really, as far as I'm aware now, not really anything beyond simple skin irritation that could occur. I know they use it in treatment of other things where I know they actually can place it sometimes on people's skin, but for Lyme disease and for the situation that we're talking about with ticks, we recommend that you follow the guidelines on the bottles that say it's for the equipment and not the person. But if you did some research on that, you'd see all the
To
things I
add
saw.
to that, environmentally, you want to know. So environmentally, permethrin is very toxic to freshwater fish.
Yes.
So if you are using permethrin, you want to be very careful with going through streams, especially because we apply it to our shoes and socks. So you want to stay away from freshwater streams or rivers and things like that because it can be very toxic to the fish and some other macro invertebrates.
So is DDT, and we know what happened there, not only with fish, I might add. But one of the concerns I have in your presentation, you indicated that there's clothing available, and they advertise that up to 70 machine washings over years, however long that takes, that they still have tick-preventing qualities. Yet when you spray your clothes with permethrin, it's only good for 4 weeks and up to 6 machine washings. Do either of you two know why there's such a discrepancy
Yes.
between permethrin sprayed clothes and what Cabela's or Gander Mountain or
Yeah,
LLB
it's all
now,
in the preparation. So if you know anything about manufacturing of clothing, it starts with the fibers. So some companies and the companies that are doing this pre-treated clothing actually, I don't know the name that they use in textiles, but they treat the fibers, and in the process of making the fibers before it even gets a spool of the yarn. So that part of it's treated, so when you put it in the clothing, it's already adhered harder than when you spray your own clothes, because it's in the fibers and deep in there, so the washing's not gonna pull it out, where we're just spraying the external part.
Do you then believe their assertion that it's good for up to 70 machine washings? I mean, that's pretty, to me, it's quite a claim. You know what I mean?
I don't know if there's science behind any of that, but I take everything with a grain of salt, and
Yeah.
do what you feel is important for yourself, I would continue with that.
Nicole, Jackie, thank you. I mean, the presentations are both great. And just because of the taping piece for also people watching, I get asked a lot, and if you can answer this, I'm not sure if you can. Why isn't there a vaccine? And can you offer anything to that, if that's, what people are thinking, because we can see the amount of work that we have to be so cognizant of everything, we have to be really on top of ourselves, we have to be on top of our doctors, we have to be on top of everything to protect the health. So I often get asked, why isn't there a vaccine, and why can't we spray? And I think the spray piece, we'll talk about probably the neurological and some of the pieces, but can either one of you add to those two questions?
So Lyme disease is very complex. There's many different strains of Lyme disease, and it becomes very challenging with getting a vaccine that would be accurate enough with all those strains. So if you think about the flu, how many different flus, and it's a snapshot of them trying to guess which strains can be available in the environment that year and what's going to cause the endemic. Lyme disease, every strain's out there all the time, and you can't put more than 3 strains in a vaccine for it to be accurate. So the efficacy behind it and the accuracy is very low when it comes to that part of things. The vaccine that was on the market was pulled because of adverse reactions, people getting Lyme-like symptoms and things like that. Some money issues with it being very geographically located, so the pharmaceutical companies and vaccine companies weren't making the money that they thought they could. So there's a lot behind it, but right now the challenging part is to get one that's accurate enough that won't cause you a false sense of security, because the efficacy behind it won't be there.
And just think, with all those different strains, if you were to get the vaccination here in the United States, our strain is, the different strains that are here are then different than what's over in Europe. And so you might be protected for here, and you go over in the Germany and the forest there, and you think you're protected because you've had a Lyme disease vaccine, but if you don't have the strains of bacteria that would be prevalent there, then you have a false protection for that.
In the presentation, I've heard that ticks, they become reactivated after 32 degrees or when it gets above freezing. But I read an article about a year or two ago that the CDC in New York said that ticks become reactive above 40 degrees. Have either of you two heard about that at all?
It's essentially above freezing. So when the sun's out, the sun can make it feel warmer, the ticks will come out. They're always tuckered down underneath the leaf litter. They're not gonna die. They're there all year long. And in the wintertime, they'll come out on a sunny day in February, and when we get 40-degree weather. That actual degree of weather is unknown, because typically that's when your snow's melting and you start to get your open pockets of ground cover. That's when we see them more often than if you have a couple feet of snow and it's about 35. So it does vary on that cover as well. So
Is there a known temperature that'll kill them? The 0, -10, -15 that you're aware of?
I can tell you right now that in our lab, when we go out and collect ticks, we have a negative 85-degree freezer, and I will stick ticks in there that are live after our collections, and we can go back the next day and they're still alive. Eventually, they will die. It takes a couple of days, but they can survive. They're very simple. They don't have lungs, so they can't smother themselves. All they have is a midgut, salivary glands, and a Hiller's organ in a sense. They're very simple anatomy, so it takes a lot to kill them.
-85 degrees.
-85 degrees for 24 hours. We pulled them out and they started to move again.
Thank you.
Strong.
And not long ago, I've heard about the longhorn tick, and that is a growing threat perhaps in Pennsylvania. I know it was seen over in New Jersey. Could either of you two describe this new tick, is this just another carrier of Lyme disease, babesiosis, these other diseases at this point? Is this?
So all the ticks that have been collected in the United States have not been found to be carrying any diseases. We do not know as researchers if they have the capabilities of transmitting something like Lyme disease if they feed on an infected mammal. We do know that in Asia they have capabilities of spreading babesiosis in that area. There are specific species out there, so there's potential. Again, all the ticks that have been collected have been zero prevalence of diseases. We have 2 that have been identified in Pennsylvania. I think we're working on a couple more with some researchers, but Apigal is another one that's potential. And their populations will increase very quickly because they can reproduce on their own. They don't need a male to mate. So once a female engorges herself, she can lay her eggs.
You had mentioned you get your yard sprayed or treated. Do they use 7?
I don't know exactly which product they're using, but we did tell them that our concern was for ticks, and so they know that that is our goal, but I don't know specifically which the group is using. Yes.
It's fascinating about the CO2 and the pheromones. And is there a way to address an anti-pheromone ingredient for someone that would repel them? Or the CO2? I didn't know that. I just find that fascinating.
There's research at some institutions that are actually looking at a vaccine, not a vaccine for Lyme disease, but an anti-tick vaccine. So just similar to what you do with your dogs, they would vaccinate you so that you have properties in your body that would, the tick either wouldn't sense you or upon a bite would kill them. I know Europe's doing a lot of studies with that, and I believe there's some universities in the United States that are looking into that as well.
In the presentation, I saw that there was a recommendation to use 20% DEET spray on adults, but only 10% on children for protection against ticks. Do you know why there's that difference in recommended levels between adults and children? Either of you?
Neurological issues. So in developmental children, you don't want to apply anything that's chemical that would harm their abilities to develop as they grow. So DEET is associated with as a neurological
Neurotoxin?
neurotoxin. There you go. So with that application, you want to be very careful with the concentrations that you use in exposure. So when our children are growing, we don't want to use high concentrations to affect them.
Okay, thank you all for attending. Thank you, Jackie and Nicole. You can see there's a tremendous amount of knowledge that we have here between Jackie and Nicole with East Stroudsburg University here. She's here locally as a resource, and Jackie I'm working with a lot in Harrisburg. And to continue to learn about this, because I've sat through so many and I still learn every time I hear another presentation. So I hope that you that are here will spread and share the information. I continue to work with anybody and everyone locally in the community, and then also in Harrisburg. I hope to see a nice package of bills and legislation that will really push our medical community and push your doctors to really have the conversations with your family and friends on this disease state, because it is so varied and there is a lot of unknowns that everybody is learning. And it's nice to hear some of the research. And the one thing, Jackie, I have to tell you, the sneaker spray, and if you are concerned with spraying yourself or your clothes, or, because we all do think of those things, I think the sneaker spray is pretty interesting, or, the shoe spray, spraying your shoes is pretty interesting on the percentage of reduction that can offer, and it still kind of keeps it at bay, away from your body and everything else. So please, we'll be posting this on our website, and we'll be sharing it throughout the community. But if there's any other questions, please know that we're always available. So thank you for all coming this morning. Thank you both for your expertise. Thank you.